Good evening and welcome to I'm Listening Live. We have an important and great show planned for you. We have Ryan Mitchell joining us from Let's Go There and Dr. Milo Dodson, licensed psychologist, and we'll be talking about all the different events that are occurring in our culture right now. It's a very powerful time. All that's happening, unfortunately, is happening on the shoulders of some really heinous things that are occurring, but it's a really powerful form and time of revolution right now. And remember, our mental health is powerfully and importantly tied to whether or not we are celebrated and accepted in our culture. Our self-esteem, our confidence is an accumulation of what's reflected back to us. And so it's really important that we make sure everyone's mental health is centered. And the way we do that is by not just accepting, which sometimes is rooted in mere tolerance, but actually celebrating and seeing the worth and value in every single life. And that's why we're talking this week exclusively about Black lives and how they matter. And that's an important part of this conversation. Now, for those of us that are listening that are white and want to understand how they can be part of this movement and how they can be, an ally, I want to first call out that there's the personal level of work that we need to do where we need to address our own internalized racism. We're all raised in a really racist culture, and so we want to address it on our own individual level. Then we want to look at the interpersonal level, and that's the people that we have relationships to. Are we calling out those that we are relating around and to and socializing with on their racism? And then larger than that is the macro level, looking at the different organizations, systems, and institutions that we are a part of. Looking at who we're hiring, who we're not hiring, who's represented. Are we giving people of color and Black people positions of power and prominence? Or are we just doing some tokenizing work where we're making sure that we have everyone represented, but not really centering their voice or their needs? And that's what we want this show to be about, because again, racism is a mental health issue. It's also a public health issue. Again, our mental health is tied to how safe we feel in culture, but also just out in the world. And we can't move through the world feeling safe and comfortable and thriving in terms of mental health if we're constantly a target. Joining us now is Dr. Milo Dodson. How are you doing right now?
Right now, I'm doing okay. It actually felt really good to see my barber for the first time in 3 months earlier this afternoon. And all jokes aside, sure to get a haircut, but honestly, just to be able to connect with another Black man in America. And so that was really uplifting for my spirit today.
Okay. Thank you for taking time to be with us. I know that this is a really difficult time, and just to give us the emotional labor is very appreciated.
Absolutely. I'm honored to be able to be of service this way.
Thank you. So can we talk about the state of mental health for Black America right now? Talk to us about that.
Yes, that is a conversation. So first and foremost, I want to give some context for people to understand. When you're told that all lives matter as a counter to Black Lives Matter, that takes away from the centering of your well-being. That takes away from the centering of your validation as a Black person in the racist system that has been America for centuries. Now, when we think further about that, if we're really saying that Black skin or any person of color has some type of criminality to them, or they're invalidated, think about the type of negative impact that has on our mental health. We begin to feel depressed, we can feel anxious, and when we have systems of oppression and structural racism, that actually has just as heinous of a negative impact on our health as any type of physical health ailments that we have. And so when we're trying to survive a pandemic at the same time and the plague that is racism, our mental health has taken a toll. And Dr. Chris, I'm just really glad to see you as a white person in America being able to utilize this space as well as utilizing your privilege to talk about these concerns, because a lot of us, myself included, are really hurting right now.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And taking it further right now with what's going on with the people taking to the streets and protesting, is that something that feels healing towards mental health, or is that just a lot of triggering? How should we be looking at that? What perspective should we take?
I think that we should be looking at protesting and I'm glad you use that, as opposed to some people out there have been saying the rioting and only focusing on the looting. And so when there's not the centered conversation about how we got to this place in the first place, people are only looking at the looting as being problematic and not the racist or the structural oppressive system that has been America. So I think when we're looking at the part of the protesting, sure, that can be triggering for people in terms of the violence. That could be triggering in terms of some of the riots that way. But again, that's not as much of the center of all this. It's really more so about us expressing that pain as a result of the racism that we've endured for centuries.
It's powerful because again, as someone who's white, I wasn't raised in a culture that was continually challenging my worth as a human being. And so I can't begin to understand what kind of anger that would generate or hopelessness or helplessness. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing when I'm seeing people taking to the street is just them trying to build community, feel empowered, get some recognition. So to me, it seems very justifiable and understandable.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, with social media being what it is, people are using Dr. King's quote saying that a riot is the voice of the unheard. And I think there's a lot more context and a lot more depth to that quote. And so everything leading up to that had been really providing some of the historical and socio-political backdrop for understanding protests. So sure, when people don't feel like they've been heard, when people have literally been told you cannot exist in this country, that you don't matter in this country, we're in a lot of pain, and that anger needs to be expressed. And so it's really infuriating to be told not to heal in a certain type of way, not to be angry in a certain type of way, when people have actually added to the problem that led us to be angry in the first place.
Yeah, and what's really sad to watch happening is some individuals who are black and they think that they have these supportive friends or family members or colleagues, and then they have to go on their social media and there's a further injury of seeing how some of their white friends or family members or loved ones are kind of relating and responding to this and letting them down. That's got to be another added layer of trauma.
Yeah, because you think that the assumption really is that you're safe with friends and family. The assumption is that you have these connections and you have these relationships. So sure, people are going to have your back, but people would now, unfortunately, almost prioritize their political orientation instead of focusing and centering the pain that we're experiencing. And so even myself, I've had family members that I've had to disengage from, to disconnect from, and they don't care about the degrees. They don't care about me being a black man in America. It's really just about continuing this pro-Trump narrative, or this, well, why are you saying Black lives matter? All lives matter. So why that focus? And so I really want to encourage folks who are listening today and to watch and that are watching to take into consideration that it's okay to disconnect and to kind of go in a separate direction from some of those relationships. You have your biological family, and we also have our chosen family. And that it's important right now more than ever that we continue to choose people who are also choosing us.
Oh, what I love that. Choose people who are choosing you. Yeah. And also I want to say just to our white listeners and viewers, don't let the labor rest on the shoulders of black people and people of color to keep having to battle some of these posts and the family members. Feel free to step in and maybe kind of call them out and do some of the labor, because again, like, racism is created and maintained by white America. And so isn't it on our shoulders to dismantle and challenge it?
It absolutely is. Just like sexism is on the shoulders of men to dismantle and to destroy the patriarchy that way. So we can't continue to try to survive this. We as black people can't continue to be expected to survive this, to show up to work and to be professional in all these Zoom meetings that we have, and to also just being able to live. So it's really helpful not just to have allies, but to have accomplices. And I'm not trying to promote breaking the law, just to be clear. I'm trying to promote the idea that, hey, I'm going to be doing this work hand in hand with you. And being able to have some of these discussions, to be able to shoulder the load so that people of color know, and specifically Black people know, that we're not in this by ourselves.
Yeah, and thank you for that reminder, just for myself listening, where I guess when you just said what you said, like when I hear the word ally, I sometimes think of people very comfortably at home on the couch reposting things. But when I hear the word accomplice, it really reminds me to have some teeth in the game and to really get my hands dirty and to do some of the work.
And that's exactly the key difference, because being an ally is almost about convenience. You can opt in and you can opt out. You're not consistently in it. I'm a Black person all day, every day. In some spaces, I'm oppressed. In some spaces, I have privilege that way. And in some places, I have both. So it's really necessary to be able to connect with people and know that, Milo, Dr. Dodson, is an expert in the field or as a professional, but he's also not the bridge to my understanding. He's not the resource. He's an expert with resources. And so again, accomplices being able to walk hand in hand is really, really important right now.
And going back to, a mental health perspective, you talked a little bit about, without using this word, kind of self-care. What are you recommending to people, Black people that are kind of overwhelmed by what's happening right now? You talked about chosen family, taking some space. What else do you recommend?
I really want to highlight the importance, like you said, actually, of self-care in itself. It's not just about going to the spa. It's not just about #treat yourself. It's about the mentality of resisting a system that tells you that your worth is dependent on your ability to produce and to be productive and almost perform in a certain way. So self-care is about the idea that I value myself, I love myself in a system that at times and largely doesn't love me back. But you know what? I don't need that external validation. I'm going to look within, and I'm going to have that chosen family. I'm going to do things that bring me joy. And so I really want to encourage folks to know that it's okay to have joy in moments when you're also grieving. It's okay to feel happy at times when earlier in the day you were so infuriated and you were so angry. We can have a balance of all those different types of emotions, because that's what it means to be a human being. And to be honest, that's part of the story. That's part of the beauty about being Black in America.
Oh, I love that reminder, because I think it can be hard in times like this to feel like you have permission to find joy or to find peace amongst this.
Yeah, we have to give ourselves that permission to receive that love that we so freely give to others. There's so many of us that, like myself included, are in positions of advocacy, are in positions of service. And so it doesn't do anybody any good to light yourself on fire, so then that way you can keep other people warm. We can't continue to pour from empty cups. We can't continue to pour from empty vessels. So it's not about being selfish when we're thinking about ourselves first. It's more about, hey, I'm going to be so focused on taking care of myself so my smaller portion of this circle can fit into the community here. And so it's about focusing on that self-care, so then later you can be of service and later you can continue to be an advocate.
Wow, beautifully said. Dr. Milo Dodson, thank you so much for being a part of our show tonight.
Man, thank you, Dr. Chris. I really, really appreciate you. And to all those watching and listening, just want to send you lots of love, encouragement, and as a reminder that Black Lives Matter.
Beautiful. Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
And, I want to give a little bit of a call to action to our listeners. I think it's important for those that are listening, especially those with privilege and comfort, to ask yourself, am I actively working to center Black lives? Am I doing anything activistic? Is there anything I need to identify, call out, or address? Because we all have work to do. And for those that are feeling a little disempowered or hopeless, really tap into the resources you have. There's so many different ways we can be a part of this movement. We can advocate. We can donate money and time and resources. We can educate. We can also look around organizationally and look at what we're doing, what we're not doing. We can pay attention to where our money is going. There's so many different ways we can participate in ending this. Hold individuals accountable. Because again, the thing that we want to remember is there's such a thing as the transmission of trauma, and that these things don't just exist with the generation directly impacted. These are often passed along and moved forward. Violence impacts the person it's happening to, but also those around witnessing. So this is really something that hits many different levels. All right, now we're going to go to Ryan Mitchell, host of Let's Go There on Channel Q. How are you, Ryan?
Well, hello, everyone. Hi, Dr. Chris. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking a little rough. I ain't got a haircut yet, but it's okay. We're going to push through.
That's what Dr. Milo was saying. He just got a haircut, and he's like, it was like a life-changing event for many reasons.
I'm literally going. I tried to say, can we push this back? Because I'm going literally after this, but it's okay. Anything for you, Dr. Chris. Anything.
Oh, I love you. So let's just jump right in. Right now, what is it like being a Black queer man in our current cultural moment?
Wow. I mean, I feel that's such a loaded question just because there's so many emotions that I'm going through. I think it is an emotional roller coaster. I think one is just stress. One is pressure. Sadness. There's just so much where this past weekend I wanted to really kind of just disconnect, but being a Black queer person that works in media, which is another intersection that I'm grateful to have, it's difficult to try to stay on top of the news and also disconnect from things that just feels like trauma porn at this point,
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to be vigilant about as a person, a white person, is like, what am I contributing to, and what is my responsibility, and trying to not further trigger or traumatize anyone, but also trying to kind of amplify and provide resources. So are you focusing on self-care? You're taking care of yourself in the ways that you need?
To be honest, I am just now starting to think about that. I think I have been asking a lot of my friends and colleagues in this industry, like, how are you disconnecting? A journalist, especially after watching journalist after journalist being attacked, that journalist from CNN that was arrested on the scene, it just hits very close to home. And so it's very hard at a time like this. It's very hard at a time like this to really figure out, how do you practice self-care? I'm trying to go to therapy. I'm doing some virtual therapy. I feel like this is this as well. But yeah, it's very difficult for me to figure out what even self-care looks like right now,
And there's something that feels a little almost victim blaming in such a question, because it's basically saying, like, you're victimized on the receiving end of all this social trauma and cultural trauma. And then it's like, and what are you doing to make sure you're healing around it, when the work is really on people like myself and all of us that are kind of maintaining these systems?
Yeah, it feels wonderful. And I feel like this is something that I thought about when I was thinking about coming on here, having the conversation about hearing from, allies, right? And what that really looks like. And I always say, and this is something that I heard from Ashley Marie Preston, who's an amazing trans rights activist, and she's probably been on your show, Loveline, all the time. But she's always said, we're always looking for allies, but we're looking for accomplices, someone that's really going to be in this fight with us. And there's a balance even with that. I feel like there's so many moments where I'm seeing a lot of my white friends really want to speak up, use their platforms. They really want to amplify this message, right? And I think that's beautiful. But when does it get to the case, and I would love to know your perspective, when does it get to the case of we are amplifying those white voices more than we are people of color? And I think it's interesting because you don't want to tell someone, and especially now more than ever, who are people who just get it, you don't want to tell them, hey, slow your roll and relax, because you want people to feel this energy. You want people to be on one accord with everyone, but you also want to make sure that you are amplifying the right voices, and white people should be really passing the mic, especially right now.
Well, I think you kind of, I guess my answer would be kind of what you just said. So thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, that was real. Like, I think we need to pause and ask ourselves, who is this helping, and is this helping? But even bigger than that, I think there is something about looking to role models. I just know that there was a protest that was being held near me, and it was set up by someone who's not an organizer, someone who's white, someone who wanted to help. But there was a lot of flaws in what they were doing because they weren't asking for help. They weren't looking for direction, and they were kind of centering themselves. And so I think we just have to ask those questions.
Well, yeah, and it's like you don't want to be the white knight or the white savior right now. This is not the moment. Yes, we're looking for people of color, and Black people specifically are really looking for people to acknowledge the pain that we have been going, through for decades, for centuries at this point. And specifically for me as well, and as people that I'm noticing in the industry who has the platform to really amplify a lot of voices, it's like you have to be able to be at a place to check your ego, to say, guess what? You know what? I don't have to be praised and thanked for my amazing perspective of just being a decent human being. I need to sit back and just understand, like, these are the voices that need to be heard, because at any point, everyone is going to listen to, the white person that has the amazing perspective, and that's just a great human, because there's a sense of white comfortability there. They're comfortable. There's those people that are able to take the message from them versus taking the message from a person of color. And I think that needs to switch, because if not everyone is on the same page, if everyone is not uncomfortable, just like Black people are uncomfortable and Black lives are uncomfortable when they're lost, then what are we doing here? No one should be comfortable at a time like this.
I love that. And that's, I guess, what I was trying to communicate to other allies or white listeners is like, oh, you're uncomfortable? Yeah. Good. That maybe means you're finally waking up to what's happening. It's very uncomfortable.
It's beautiful to be uncomfortable, right? I think you taught this, and I think a lot of people need to kind of understand this, like sitting in the uncomfortableness of it all, especially more than ever. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We are in the middle of race wars that are happening constantly. We are all uncomfortable, but guess what? Coming out of that and growing, and we should be leaving this space that we're in, coming out better, educated, ready to move forward, ready to amplify voices in where places they really matter. So if you are someone that is watching this, that has a privilege of being in the industry, we're in an industry town in LA, Hollywood here, you should be taking this and being like, what can I do moving forward? I don't want things to be the same way. I need things to change, and you should be wanting that change just as much as the Black people that you're seeing everywhere talk about it at this time.
I love that, because there's literally something everyone can do. And so no one can sit there saying, oh, there's nothing I can do. You can. And I like what we're saying, which is like, if you're not uncomfortable, then maybe you need to push yourself a little more. But also, I want to highlight what you said, which was, you don't get a cookie for being a good person. Like, we just need to expect that.
That part, honestly, if I throw a fish in the water, I'm not about to throw it a fifth birthday party just because it swam. I'm not going to do that. So here's the thing. I think we need to be, there's a fine line of uplifting and saying, wow, thank you for seeing me. Thank you for seeing who I am. But there also needs to be a fine line of being like, okay, still amplify my voice, amplify the Black and brown people. And especially during Pride Month, I think now more than ever, LGBTQ people, especially white, gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans people, need to be uplifting Black queer voices more than ever at a time like this. Just because you are gay does not mean you are completely marginalized. We have to really talk about that and have these honest conversations, whether or not you're comfortable or not.
And let's go further with that conversation. Let's talk about intersectionality and intersectional perspective. Talk to us about that, how all these different levels actually align, intersect, and what it means to have all these different identities.
Yeah, I mean, what it means to have all these different identities is how you really view the world, right? I mean, I know me being a Black queer person that has the platform that I have, I get to do an amazing daily show, Let's Go There with Cheer and Ryan, all the time where we're having these conversations. My co-host is a 30-something-year-old white woman from Canada who is Jewish and way too nice. I'm literally like, whoa. And so our basis of our conversation and our relationship and our friendship started by having these conversations, started by the shifting of, guess what? This is the real world. This is what's happening. You can no longer go about your day with blinders on. There's just no way. And especially with Pride, and I tweeted something at the Slay God, give you a little follow. I tweeted something where I said, Pride started out as a riot. Pride started out with, the Stonewall riots where Black trans women and women of color were all starting this saying, enough is enough. We need to move forward. And if you think you can just celebrate Pride, dancing to Carly Rae Jepsen and not understanding, you can't celebrate that and not celebrate and uplift the voices of, Black and brown people at a time like this. This is more than ever where we need to have that.
But I do think that is actually what the bulk of people think Pride is that it's about getting drunk and dancing. Like, I think that is what they expect, and they don't understand what its mission still is supposed to be and what it was built from, and that rioting got us there.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm going to say, I don't think it was ever okay, but I most definitely don't think it's okay now, especially when you can't ignore what is happening in the world. There's no way that you can just continue to scroll on social media being like, oh, yikes, that doesn't affect me. There's just no way. And also, if you do think you can do that, your Black or brown friends know you're ignoring them. They see you ignoring them, and they see you not acknowledging what is happening in the world, because it affects all of us. I could have been a George Floyd. I could have been, every moment I wake up and my mother, who lives in Nashville still, calls me and is so worried about every little moment. I mean, I have moments more than ever now that I'm remembering those talks when I was 11, maybe even younger than that, where she's discussing to me about the police and how nervous I get if I just see a cop car sitting on the street and no one's in the car. Like, that happened to me earlier today when I was walking my dog. I immediately go the other way, because you just don't know what can happen as a person of color, as a Black man in this world. My skin color is a threat. And I feel like that's how I navigated workspaces. I've always was taught that you have to adapt to your environment, whether that means I need to, soften how I say things, add humor in things, when it shouldn't be that way, because my white counterparts would never have to change who they are if they need to get something done or have something to be said, or, people can fail forward and still be half of what I was told and expected that I had to be to survive in this country. And so there's some real life conversations that I feel need to start in, at young ages with white kids. I mean, this is not something that you can just have right now. This is something that parents need to be teaching their children about. And we talked about this on the show today. Like, how do you discuss these conversations? How do you have these conversations with children at a time like this? And the answer is, you just do it. You just do it.
But that is what it is. And that's what I try to tell people. It might not be familiar. It might not be comfortable. Do it anyway. You're allowed to make mistakes, but also, like, take some time and educate. Stop being lazy. I say that lovingly to some of our listeners. Maybe take a day off from the gym or a day off from the spa and get some books. There's a lot of phenomenal books out there by Black writers that have been willing to do the labor of holding your right hand through it all, and will tell you what to do and break it down.
I don't have the energy anymore.
That's right.
I don't have the energy anymore. And I know a lot of my Black friends and my colleagues and the people in this industry, we just don't have the time or the space anymore, because I have been so exhausted with just trying to find ways of remaining professional, getting my job done, because guess what? At the end of the day, Black people have been going through this. We still have to push through. I don't have time to cry about this. I don't have time to let myself feel this, because I have work that needs to be done. I have to pay bills. I have to continue to come on this platform and make sure I'm bridging the gap to have conversations that everyone can learn from. I don't have time for that, and that's just something that a lot of Black people feel. We don't have time to do it, because this has been life. This is something that we've always seen. And so for us, it's about getting the ball moving and rolling and actually being like, where is the change going to happen? Because I've noticed a lot of my white friends have been reaching out to me, which has been wonderful, because they've been checking in, and I appreciate that. But the tone of it all sounds like they are pitting me for being Black. And that's not what I want you to be sad about. I want you to be sad that Black people are being treated in the way that they are, because, honey, I'm glad I'm Black. I'm happy that I'm here. I'm happy that I have the platform that I do. But don't pity me just because of my skin tone. Pity me because there's a large group of people who are losing their lives because of their skin tone.
And what's heartbreaking is just watching the news. We have our racist president who's not helping. Here in LA, we have a racist police chief who's making problematic statements. And so it's really hard for someone like yourself to feel safe when the people that are supposed to keep you safe aren't even doing that job.
More than ever. I mean, the curfews have been scaring me. I mean, it's sad, because I feel like at a point now with the curfews happening, I can't even take my dog for a walk for the second time of the day, It's like when the curfews happen, it's like, oh, I'm in the house, I'm not moving, because I'm living in a neighborhood where I can't even order food off of Postmates. And if I haven't gotten groceries, then I can't go to the grocery stores in my neighborhood, because everything is boarded up and everything is closed and the deliveries aren't happening. So I'm in the space where I live next to downtown Los Angeles, and that's where a lot of these protests are happening. And it's unfortunate because I could be miles and thousands of miles away from it, but still could be considered like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you out right now? And it's just very scary at a time like this. And I'm just trying to, I don't really know. To be honest, I don't really know how to even continue to navigate a time like this. I'm really trying.
But I don't want you to have to. I don't want you to have to. It shouldn't be on you to figure that out. Like, it's on people like myself to figure out how we can change the world that people like myself created. That makes you, again, on the receiving end of trying to have to figure this out.
But until then, I still have to figure out how to live.
Yeah.
So I still have to figure out what's the best plan for me. We still have to figure this out. And I want to be able to make sure we're having these conversations where people are willing to listen, and I know it's so uncomfortable for when white people are feeling like, I don't resonate with this. I don't think I'm a racist. I don't see what people are seeing on the TV. But to be honest, every white person is inherently has some type of stereotypes or racism embedded in them just because of the media portrayals. How you see Black and brown people portrayed in the media has a lot to do with this. So if any moment you have a stereotype in your brain, that's all a part of it. And it's hard for people to really acknowledge that. It's hard for the oppressors to have to deal with the trauma of being an oppressor. Let's be honest.
Well, that's why, one of the things I said, I think in the in-between segment I was pointing out is, please, everyone listening, take some time and ask yourself, where might that racism exist for me? And if you don't have an answer, you need to go back and keep asking yourself that, because it's there somewhere. And if you can't identify it, you can't address it. And look, I'm a quote unquote doctor and I work in the field and I'm supposed to be better than all this. And I had to check my own ego and be like, you still are a product of this culture and you still have those pieces in you. And I have to examine them. And so we all need to take the time to do that.
It's so true. And I really wanted to know, and I don't know if you've already talked about it, but I would love to know your perspective of what Grindr just did by removing the ethnicities. I don't really know what that is supposed to do, because a lot of times people use that filter, that ethnicity filter, as a way to combat racism.
To avoid white people.
As a tool to avoid that.
Yes.
So it's like, What is that really doing? I would love to know your perspective.
So for those that aren't familiar, so Grindr is a dating, socializing, sex-seeking app, and they traditionally have an area you can click like what races you're open to connecting with or seeking, and they've taken all that down.
Honey. Sometimes I click the little white button to see if my credit score goes up.
I mean, you bring a valid point, though, because some of the responses I heard from people are, if they remove that, it then doesn't allow me to rule out white people. I want to actually only find people of color to date. I'll say this. I like that they're thinking. It might not be the perfect solution, but I like that they're thinking. And more importantly, I like that someone who runs a sex app is still taking themselves seriously and holding themselves accountable. And so more of that. Like, let's all leave tonight's show examining whatever it is the work we do in the world. How might we be able to be a better ally in that? So I like that part.
Yes, that's one so powerful, and I appreciate that perspective. And I mean, one thing that I even want Black people to understand, if you're watching this, and Black people that are working, to understand, like, it's okay to set boundaries. If you are working currently, and if you have your colleagues that are wanting to talk about these things, it is okay to say, give me a second. I've even had conversations with my team on my show being like, I want to cover this. This is important. I appreciate you for bringing this to me, but I need sometimes to space it out. I need a break. I need a moment to just talk about something else, And I think there's some power in that, because oftentimes Black people in workspaces don't feel comfortable with setting those boundaries because they will automatically be deemed difficult to work with, or just difficult in general, mean, angry. And it's just like, no, taking the time, especially more than ever, it's hard. This is a hard time to continue to be professional, especially when you're working from home.
Yeah, when you were saying earlier about all that's happening, you're still showing up and doing your show. All I can say is thank you. Thank you for your willingness to continue to do the emotional labor while all this is happening.
Well, I think I have no other choice, because I'm I haven't participated in the protest because this is my form of protest, in my opinion. Sitting behind this mic, someone who has a platform in the way that I do, and I'm so happy that I work for an amazing company, radio.com, Intercom, that allows me to express myself in the way that I do, and also allows me to be a part of conversations with Pat Prescott, Yessie Ortiz from Amp Radio, and AJ Gibson from the Morning Beats, have these conversations where it's an open forum where we can really have real convos, not just convos that we can dance around. We're hearing people, we're listening to people, and it's so important because I've never worked for a company like this. I feel like all my past companies that I've worked for, they would have never probably even touched on this. It would have just been another day. And so for me, that's really been helpful to know that, yes, I have to talk about this, but at least I know I'm doing it for a purpose and a reason.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm thankful as well. That's why we tried to make, this show, I'm Listening Live, all about this week as well, to try to amplify and give a platform to. Ryan Mitchell, thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. And I love you. You know you're my favorite.
I love you right back. Have an awesome night.
You too. I got to go drink the rest of my cocktail. Bye.
Bye. So I want to just, again, advocate for everyone to take a few minutes and just quietly check in with themselves and say to yourself, am I doing all I can do? Is there anything I can do that has not been addressed? And again, really looking at the work internally with ourselves, looking at the work with those we're in relationship to, because again, we can influence others positively. And then going back to the organizations we're part of and the systems and institutions and figuring out how we can also help create change on those levels. And everyone, self-care, self-care, self-care. Please make sure you're centering that, rest and healing. And we'll be here all week, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. You can check out all past shows on all the radio.com handles. Thank you all for joining us. Take care of yourselves, sending out love and support, and you all have a beautiful night.